Good morning, Dr. Edna Sanchez and classmates. I'm Jessa Dado. I'm going to present my report based on the topic that was assigned to me. I will discuss my research paper entitled Practical and Policy Considerations in Implementing Juvenile Justice Reform. In this report, we will be able to identify the problems encountered by the juvenile justice system, and we will be able to recognize the possible methods in improving the system. I will start with the introduction. Juvenile justice systems have long-standing methods for controlling behavior, such as community supervision and custodial care, though these are not always used as efficiently and effectively as possible. Effective programming to reduce recidivism and produce other positive outcomes, however, has been more problematic. For additional information, recidivism is the tendency of a convicted criminal to reoffend. Juvenile justice system makes use of many treatment programs, but in most cases, the effectiveness of those programs is difficult to determine and largely unknown. An increasing body of research evidence addresses this problem, but the findings of that research have not been well integrated into the most juvenile justice systems. The juvenile justice system has made enormous progress in program development and system reforms over the past 20 years. Nonetheless, many systems continue to struggle with achieving a balance of community-based versus institutional-based care and managing the tension between the rehabilitative versus public safety functions. For additional information, community-based care is coordinated and integrated care that provides a range of community settings and delivered in a way that is person and population centered. In particular, juvenile justice systems in most states struggle with three challenges. Number one, reducing reliance on incarceration, especially for minority youth. Number two, building effective community-based programs for probation, re-entry, aftercare, and parole systems to accommodate reductions in secure confinement. And number three, ensuring that effective programs are targeted to appropriate offenders in a way that will have optimal effects on recidivism. For additional information, institution-based care is defined as a type of residential care for large groups of children, and the service provision is depersonalized. Meeting these challenges requires a clear view of the outcomes expected of the juvenile justice system, a well-developed plan for achieving them, and effective use of management tools for implementing that plan. Some of the barriers are practitioner-based, while others are environmental, organizational, and systematic barriers that must be overcome for effective implementation. For additional information, practitioner-based refers to the research or evaluation performed in a professional field as opposed to academic researchers. The juvenile justice field is rife with skepticism about adoption of evidence-based practice. One common fear is that new evidence-based programs will siphon funding away from presumably effective yet untested services. The problems of street children and juvenile delinquents are much related social problems. To survive in the street, you almost have to become delinquent. For additional information, evidence-based program is a program that has been vigorously tested in controlled settings, proven effective, and translated in practical models that are widely available to community-based organizations. Exposed to criminal elements, these children are vulnerable to prostitution, drug addiction, and pushing and commission of crimes. Most street children have become juvenile delinquents either out of necessity because they are poor or through force because of the syndicates. For additional information, juvenile delinquents are those who have habitually committed criminal acts or offenses, especially one below the age at which ordinary criminal prosecution is possible. So many times the streets were cleaned up at the start of the tourist season, and as a consequence, many street children were jailed because of the vagrancy laws. A large problem arose from the street and treatment accorded to the juveniles when they were placed in jails. For additional information, vagrancy refers to a condition of homeless without regular employment or income. Most juvenile delinquents were not segregated from the hardened adult criminals in the biggest jails in the Philippines, so that after their release they went back in the street with more knowledge of crime. This severely hampered the social integration of the youth offenders after they left prison. Chances were high that these young offenders would become chronic delinquents and eventually hardened criminals. According to RA 9344, the state recognizes the vital role of children and youth in nation building and shall promote and protect their physical, moral, spiritual, intellectual, and social well being. It shall inculcate in the youth patriotism and nationalism and encourage their involvement in public and civic affairs. The state shall protect the best interests of the child through measures that will ensure the observance of international standards of child protection, especially those to which the Philippines is a party. Proceedings before any authority shall be conducted in the best interest of the child and in a manner which allows the child to participate and to express himself or herself freely. The participation of children in the program and the policy formulation and implementation related to juvenile justice and welfare shall be ensured by the concerned government agency. I have included some reviewed literatures that somehow are related to my research paper, Implementation of Juvenile Justice and Welfare Act of 2006, Inputs to Policy Amendments. The study aimed to assess the status of implementation of RA 9344 or the Juvenile Justice and Welfare Act of 2006 with respect to the various sectors, namely police, city social welfare, and development and family court. It also determined the problems encountered by the three groups of respondents and test the difference among the responses of the three groups. It was found out that majority of the juvenile offenders in Batangas City are 15 to 17 years old. Single males finished elementary education with crime of theft committed in 2012 and under the custody of their parents or legal guardians. Objectives, compliance, evaluation, and monitoring as the status of RA 9344 were implemented as a new approach in criminal justice system with juvenile offenders. Each sector experiences problems in implementing RA 9344, especially when it comes to insufficient knowledge of the child and the parents regarding the child's severity of crime and constitutional rights. The study found a significant relationship between the status of implementation of RA 9344 and the problems encountered. Further, there are differences between the responses of the three groups of respondents. Exemption of youth offenders in criminal responsibility has an impact on the community since the youth may repeat the crime or they could commit crime that is more severe than the previous crime committed. Additionally, compliance, evaluation, and monitoring were found to be significantly related to the impact of exemption of youth offenders in criminal responsibility. An outside chance, street children and juvenile justice, an international perspective. In many countries around the world, children who live and work on the streets are particularly vulnerable to human rights violations in juvenile justice systems. They are highly likely to come into contact with criminal justice system in the first place, and they are less able to defend themselves from abuse once within the system. These children are discriminated against and have their rights violated because they are poor. Legal implementation, the missing piece of the puzzle in safeguarding children from violence in the Philippines. The Philippines is a party to the Convention on Rights of the Child or the CRC and is therefore legally bound to protect children and provide safeguards for their well-being. In 2016, after more than a decade of advocacy, the Philippines enacted legislation to establish a comprehensive juvenile justice and welfare system. With this law now in effect, children in the Philippines are ostensibly the beneficiaries of an array of mechanisms designed to identify and safeguard their rights and best interests. Yet, abuse, degradation, and neglect remain endemic in the Philippines, and the risk of violence against children continue to deepen. In the context of the current war on drugs, assessments and intake processes in juvenile justice processing, emerging policy considerations. Recent reforms have expanded the possibilities for gathering and sharing information during, during juvenile justice processing and have included calls for comprehensive assessments of all juvenile referrals. However, scant attention has been given to questions concerning the timing, goals, or uses of assessments, the structure and goals of intake, or the role of assessments in intake. These questions merit closer investigation because variation in assessment or intake goals and practices will likely constrain the efficient or efficacy of juvenile processing. Using interview and survey data from the study of county-level intake processes in Texas, this study identifies and discusses their policy implications. Objectives. At the end of the discussion of this research paper, we should be able to provide immediate intervention, appropriate sanction, and treatments for the juvenile delinquents. To overcome the challenges and sustainability of the juvenile justice system, and to provide a recommendation to the pillars of the criminal justice system and promote a program that will increase or improve the capacity of the juvenile justice system. Conclusion. This research paper shows the optimal performance of the entire juvenile justice system that needs to be operated on a research-informed, evidence-based platform. The comprehensive strategy with the standardized program evaluation protocol integrated as the central tool for ensuring evidence-based programming for juvenile offenders provides a holistic approach to ensure that a juvenile justice system and its service system are operating in a cost-effective way to improve outcomes for the youth in its care. Moreover, this strategy is neither burdensome nor cost prohibitive to implement, nor does it undermine the current service delivery system. This paper has presented a framework for juvenile justice system reform that is organized around evidence-based treatment programs for juvenile offenders, integrated into a comprehensive strategy for deploying those programs in a cost-effective manner that maximizes effect on recidivism. Recommendation. The tradition of juvenile correctional work and its kindred relationship with adult correctional models in policy, practice, and staffing are barriers to the adoption of robust, developmentally approached systems of juvenile sanction and treatment services. This research paper hereby recommends the following. To juvenile justice system administrators. Build a forward-looking administrative model, a system organized around risk management that supports the development of individualized disposition plans for offenders. Placement should be guided by a disposition matrix. The program continuum should be populated with effective intervention programs and integrated with a graduated sanctions framework. Structured decision-making tools should be used to increase system capacity for one, better matching of offender treatment needs with effective services in comprehensive treatment plans, two, targeting the higher risk offenders, and number three, making improvements in prevention court and correctional programs. Having these structured decision-making tools in place, along with an automated management information system, and efficiently using them is essential for effective system-wide implementation of an evidence-based system. To legislators, legislate mandatory evidence-based programming for all youth services, and the effort needs to be diffused. Codified criteria ensure that only evidence-based and research-based program services are implemented statewide and promote meritorious, theory-based and pilot programs by providing limited funding with the expectation that some of these will achieve the higher evidence-based standards. For judges, serve as a driving force to draw together the various agencies and individuals who comprise the juvenile justice system for the purpose of developing and implementing meaningful system reform. Serve as a positive influence with treatment providers by establishing clear expectations for application of evidence-based juvenile justice services within your jurisdiction. Treatment providers are highly cognizant that judges order juveniles to participate in specific treatment programs. Judges who express a preference for referring youth to programs that are aligned with current recidivism reduction research will provide the motivation needed to get youth and families the quality services they deserve. To treatment providers, recognize that the research matters to youth, families, and communities. Although a few influential therapists may extol the advantages of having the freedom to deliver individualized services without the influence of research, a host of juveniles and their families have already experienced the superior benefits of evidence informed treatment from therapists willing to adhere to that evidence, and a host of juveniles and their families are likely still waiting for services with just such benefits. Learn the language of risk and risk reduction as applied to the juvenile justice system. Target and intensively serve those youth deemed to be high risk by validated juvenile justice risk assessment tools. Youth exhibiting the highest risk levels need the most intensive services for the longest duration. Youth with moderate and low risk should be offered a less intensive array of services. Begin now to clearly articulate the concise treatment service manuals, the clinical protocols and procedures being used by clinicians. This is the end of my report. Thank you so much.